and we actually get involved with our audience on tonight, a continuation of tonight's topic, Each One Teach One. And it was a great first half of the show. It was so great, I didn't get to half the questions. And actually, one of the questions was, I'm not sure who this is presented to, but it must be you, Brittany. What kind of homework do you send home for a kindergarten student?
Well, I do teach kindergarten and first grade standards because there aren't that many academic standards for kindergartners. So I want my students to achieve, so I start teaching them first grade standards. The type of homework that I send home is split by days. On Mondays, they'll do reading, Tuesdays, writing, Wednesdays, math, Thursdays, science and social studies. And the homework packet is all aligned with the academic standards that they will be learning for that particular week. So it's an extra way for that child to get the information that I'm going to teach them at home, and for their parents to assist them with the homework to kind of get a double dose of what they'll be learning. They turn their homework in on Friday, and then they get it back at Friday.
So when you say that you teach them your kindergarten, but you also teach them first grade, I don't know all the language with it.
For example,
but what I want to say to that is when you're teaching them, you said it's accelerated group of kids or accelerated program, right?
Right.
What about that student that's struggling? Is that fair to that student if you're teaching the accelerated? You'll get me for sure.
I don't penalize.
You don't penalize.
I don't penalize them for that because the children are tested on the kindergarten academic standards, so they do have weekly tests. However, I teach 2 math programs. I teach the kindergarten standards, but then I also teach a first grade math program.
So you make sure you get the kindergarten stuff.
The kindergarten standards are taught, and that is my main focus. Also, if a child is failing, I can send data to my architect, which is like my boss, every week, in an Excel spreadsheet with the child's name on it, what percentages they got. If that child is below a 70%, I have to reteach those standards. So, that makes my job harder, but also it makes the student to make #1 focus, because not only am I reteaching standards that maybe a certain child did not get the previous week, but I'm also teaching that current week standards as well.
Now you're in a charter school. I don't know if that's considered Columbus. How does that work? Columbus Public. So, is that true for teachers in the Columbus Public? Do they do some database?
Not necessarily. It may be required in some schools now, but those standards, and although Brittany says she does not penalize, in the long run, a child is penalized, because if they get to first grade and they don't have the standards that they need, then they're going to be behind. And what a lot of parents, this is something that parents need to know, is that I've heard parents say, well, I just don't want them to leave, and because they've been babies and they've been with me every day, and I don't want to send them to daycare, and I don't want to send your child to preschool. Because if they get to kindergarten and they don't know their numbers, their alphabet, and their colors, and their shapes, those are things that you used to learn in kindergarten. Now you need to know those when you get to kindergarten. And if you don't know them when you get to kindergarten, you will be penalized in the sense that you will be behind.
Honestly speaking, kindergarten is the same. Kindergarten is not what you feel like kindergarten used to be. We don't take naps.
Oh, we used to take some naps.
In kindergarten.
Crackers.
People ask, how can you have a child that is failing kindergarten? It's simple. I don't have parent support. You have children that do not know their colors. It's the middle of the year. You have children that do not know, they cannot recognize letters of the alphabet. They cannot recognize sounds of the alphabet. Do not know their letters, are still writing their numbers backwards. Cannot tell you what the number 5 looks like. And that's a huge disservice, especially for children that cannot even recognize their letters. Because you need to recognize your letters to move on to your letter sounds. You move on to your letter sounds to be able to blend letters, to be able to start reading. You start reading, and then you go on to writing. So if you don't know your letters, you can't read or write. And if you can't read or write, how can you do math or social studies? That's how you fail kindergarten.
You got that? That's really good. Trina, stand up, and that way I know who's standing up.
Just commenting on what Pastor said, it is really important to send your children to preschool, because I sent Malik to preschool, and by the time he got to kindergarten, he already knew his numbers. He knew they had a thing called wall words in preschool. He knew words, he can spell words and all that stuff. And then they were telling me, well, in kindergarten, well, Malik already knows the thing, and he was cutting up because he was bored, because he knew the thing they already teaching him in kindergarten. So they gave him more challenging things because he already knew what they were teaching. He was like, oh, this stuff is boring. I already know this already. So he was cutting up. So therefore, they do need to challenge more.
Okay. Danny?
You guys talked a little bit about the technology. And my question is, as a parent, what would you suggest when you talk about utilizing the technology, the internet, the tweeting, Facebook? What would you suggest as a parent? How would you suggest that we utilize those technologies to turn them into positive things? And more so, be specific as to how it relates spiritually, or what can we do spiritually, as well as what can we do academically to turn that technology into a positive.
I think, now, my opinion is if your kid has a Facebook or a Twitter, you need to be out there on Facebook and Twitter.
Right.
Because it's almost like leaving your kid alone by itself. Because just like, what was it, where people were, like the kids are left alone on the internet, and how there's predators out there that actually tries to pull your kid in. And there's been times where people have talked kids, young girls into meeting them somewhere and things like that, and things have been killed. I just feel that if you have it, I used to be one that I didn't think I was ever going to do no Facebook. I thought that was the silliest stuff for grown people to be on. But again, it has been a great tool for me. It has been a good networking tool for me. Not only that, it keeps me connected with people. Now, you're going to have some stuff on there that you don't like and you see and stuff like that, but there's a way to hide things where they don't show up on your actual page. But if you're a parent and you want to stay connected with what's going on with your kids and stuff, get on there.
And not only that, I mean, there's applications out there. I mean, we have so much technology. You have problems with texting in the classroom. Well, if your parents are paying the cell phone bills, there's applications where you can talk to Sprint or Nextel
and
suspend it during the day. There's hours of the day where you can get that suspended, where a child cannot text during the day, or you can, I mean, there's a there's applications out there where you can get the content of what your child is saying on Twitter. There's an application where if you type in certain words that you want to pop up, then if your child is saying those words, there will be a message that will be sent to your email or to your phone that will state what your child is talking about on Facebook and on Twitter. But you also have to teach your child to use technology as a tool. Well, I'm coming from I'm a parent now, so I have to speak for it as a parent. But what I'm saying, there's technology out there. You have to encourage your child to use technology for good. I mean, there's research.
She's killing y'all tonight. All your cousins is looking like, cut her off.
One thing that I did want to say in reference to that, and as a parent, I just found out 2 days ago that through the service I have, that I can put this feature on the phone where I can do a soft hold, where I can turn my child's phone off, or disconnect Twitter or Facebook anytime I want to. I just found this out 2 days ago, and I didn't know anything about that.
And if I might respond to that, two things. One, initially I was really more talking about teachers using the technology for the positive. From a parent standpoint, there's a couple things. One, we have to learn to teach our children not to be a character, but to have character. Okay. Because if we shut it down and close it and all of those kind of things, you really haven't gotten to the heart of the problem. See, if you've got a sneaky little deviant devil, then you need to deal with that issue. Because cutting their phone off just makes them borrow somebody else's or go through somebody else's. So all you're doing is heightening their sneak mode. So, you know, it is really teaching them to have character. It is learning certain things that come into your house as a Christian. And so, just as you lock your front door, you lock your windows at night, there are certain things that need to be locked electronically. Your own server at your house needs to be locked. It needs to have a filter on it so that at a certain time at night it goes down. So that it is always filtered. And then your cable televisions need to be locked with password protection. So that there are certain things that don't come into your house. You are responsible as a Christian for what comes into your house. So when you lock your doors, you lock your house electronically also. But in terms of just shutting down their Facebook, all they're going to do is open another. And so you pray with them, you teach them the right way, and you show diligence over your household. And then they will learn and appreciate that in time.
I got a question here. How do you feel about the fact that society has demanded that prayer and God be taken out of the school system?
Prayer is not out of school.
It's prayer.
It's prayer in school every day.
Oh, yes, because they let...
As long as, well, no, not just Muslims. As long as Christian people have kids in school, then prayer is in school. They can't stop my child from praying in school. They can't stop the students and the people of faith that belong to the church that I go to from praying in school. So there are prayers that take place before tests. There are prayers that take place before meals. There are prayers that take place in the hallway. Don't let the devil fool you and make you think that there's still a remnant of Christian children in schools all across the country. And so prayer is not out of school. Prayer is in school.
You belong to the Christian
Fellowship of Christian
I
Athletes.
did too. Yeah.
Okay.
Prayer is not out of school. Prayer is in school.
Okay. What was the most difficult situation you had with a student, and how did you handle it?
I got kicked just like you did.
I got hit.
You got hit, I got kicked. And I was in the hallway, and so
Me too.
I was talking to the little fella, and I told him, he said, "I'll kick you." I said, "No, you won't. You love me. You won't kick me." "Yes, I will." I said, "No, you won't kick me." And about that time, he kicked me just as hard as he could. So he kicked me. And I had a practice of really not sending students to the office. I rarely did that because I felt like if I sent them to the office that I lost my authority in my classroom. And so I wouldn't have sent him to the office. I would have dealt with him right there. But he was in the hallway. Teacher across the hall says, "Sheldon got kicked." And she's pushing the intercom and calling the office, and everybody from the office that came down, they got this little boy up in the air, you know, like I had really been assaulted. And so they called his mother, and they had the conference. And so I was sitting there with the principal, and I had a very good principal. He talked to his mother. And he told the mother, you know, that he's going to have to be out of school for a couple of days. And, you know, he's kicked us teacher, and that's wrong. And how do you feel about it? So they went through all that spiel, and I was quiet. And so finally he looked at me, and he says, "Do you have anything to say to the student and to his mother?" I said, "Yes, I do." I said, "Little boy, the next time you have a problem in my classroom, I've got your mother's address. I'm going to come. I'm going to knock on the door, because I can't paddle you. They won't allow me to put my hands on you. But now that I've met your mother and I know how she feels, I'm going to come to your house. I'm going to knock on the door, and I'm going to have a little keen switch in my hand, and I'm going to tell her to hand you out, and you're going to be mine." And that was the end of that. He was a perfect student for the rest of the time. They say I can't paddle him in school, but I'll go to the house and beat the mess out of him.
You know, the situation when the little girl hit me,
it's like the first or second day of school.
It was a couple days of school, but I mean, I had to realize that this child never been in a school setting before. She was Muslim. Never, she just didn't know. She didn't want to be away from her mom, so she hit me. Mom was still down the hallway. Excuse me, miss. We don't do that here. She hit me. She had to go. But like I said, that was. She's in another classroom.
She's doing okay.
She's doing just fine. Me and her are best friends now. We slap fives in the hallway. Well, she'll hit me anymore.
You know what I wanted to also bring up? When I'm off sometimes, I go visit, I drop in Brittany's class, and I went in there one particular morning, and I was like, oh, Lord, your dad didn't talk to you into doing this. She had classical music playing. I said, oh, my God, Troy didn't talk to you to do this. I said, why the classical music? And share with us why you do classical music.
Classical music stimulates learning.
It does.
It just stimulates learning. It makes them focus, and I call it thinking music. And I tell my children, they can't talk above my thinking music. If I can't hear my thinking music, then I can't teach. And so they already know. Miss Moore can't hear our thinking music. You need to quiet down. And they come right in. They get to their morning work.
They came in, and I was looking around, and they was like, "Hi, Miss Moore." And Brittany slapping them fives, and I was like, "Look at little Britt, just this much taller than the student."
Especially at Tchaikovsky, if you're going to invest.
Who?
Tchaikovsky, if you get Tchaikovsky is good, Bach is good. It's very good to stimulate their mind.
Maybe we should have it at home for homework. Somebody's have it at home for homework and things like that.
One thing that I do want to say as delicately as I possibly can, parents have to realize that students, the teachers, they spend a lot of their money. And supplies at the beginning of the year run out. This goes for high school children. This goes for middle school children. This goes for elementary school children. Just a simple gesture of bringing a teacher dry erase markers can go a long way. And that can make that teacher, even if that teacher was feeling a certain way about your child, just you showing the extra gesture of bringing in something or saying thank you to the teacher, because it's a thankless job. We don't ask for thanks, but it does make us feel better. And to get a simple gesture of dry erase markers or erasers, just things that we have to go out and purchase, it goes a long way. And maybe the teacher had felt some kind of way about your child, but just that simple gesture can help turn a new light and make that teacher feel way better about your child.
Have you guys had any issues where you started off where you didn't like your teacher and you thought she was whatever, and then towards the end of the year you got better with it? Yeah. Guys are quiet because y'all are really mad at her. Yeah, yes. Any other questions? Laura, you had your hand up.
I just wanted to know, do they still have pre-K?
Yeah.
Yes.
So you have pre-K and then you go to kindergarten.
That's correct.
Elementary school?
Yes.
Is there pre-K?
Columbus Public still has pre-K. As a matter of fact, that's Dr. Smith, actually a friend of mine, Dr. Bernice Smith, is over all pre-K programs in Columbus Public. I don't know about charter schools and whatnot, but yes, Columbus Public still has excellent pre-K. Matter of fact, our pre-K programs are excellent.
Excellent pre-K. Even though my daughter's 40 years old, she went to pre-K and she just excelled.
Yeah, excellent pre-K.
Pre-K does make a difference.
It does.
Now let me ask this question. I've always, and I know I'm not by myself, sometimes it's thought that if you send your kids to a suburban school, if like you move out of the hood and you send them to schools like that are not in the district, is it true that they learn better in those schools? Because Southwestern, there was a girl that lived in Southwestern district, and she thought her kids were going to the best school until they had to move back into the inner city. And when they got back into Columbus Public, they were behind.
Well, sometimes it just depends. It depends on which suburb you live in, because the tax levy is going to be different based upon that particular suburb. So it's based on the particular suburb. The problem, and I'm glad you asked that question, because the problem with our school system is that, and again, no disrespect to Dr. Harris, because I know she'd be bothered if I said we had a problem, but the problem overall for us through the years has been the fact that we have city schools. If we had county schools, our education system would be different. See, what happens is, if you got Columbus, you got Columbus City Schools, it's too easy for people to work in town and then go live in Lancaster or Galloway or wherever else, take their kids out of the district, feel like they're not connected to the city of Columbus. If it was a Franklin County school, then Dublin could not get away from Columbus. Whitehall and Bexley could not get away. All of our kids would have to be, those in the public school system would all have to be educated at the same level. But because we have these city schools, then Bexley has a different kind of standard than Columbus does.
So basically, they can come and work in the city,
Right.
but they don't have to. They can come take the money,
But they don't have to live.
but they don't have to. Well,
They don't have to live, and they don't have to care about your children, because Columbus is an area that's, you know, cut into pieces and whatnot. County schools are better. Such if you go to the South, you will find out that people are educated slightly better at times because of the fact that they have county schools.
I wouldn't think that down south. I think my perception of down south would be. I said Kelly's. My perception would be something totally different because it's south. And when we think about south, I don't know if anybody else thinks. I think of slow, not slow as in slow learning, but just slow pace.
Think about the black world, the African American world. Think about the number of historically African American colleges that are in the South, as opposed to those that are in the North. Because again, in the South, where there are county schools,
You're finishing and we're not.
right?
Okay.
I think also parents need to use, the internet as a tool. I mean, there are good schools in the inner city in Columbus Public, but parents just aren't researching that. There's school ratings that are on the Ohio Department of Education website where you can find what rating your school is. Is it in continuous improvement, effective? Is it excellent? Also, they're starting something new where teachers are being rated. So next year, I will be on Ohio Department of Education website, and I will be accountable for my progress that I've made my students. So not only can you research schools, but you can also research teachers, and you can get to a point where you can request a teacher. So if you are at Briggs, you can find out what teachers at Briggs are effectively teaching, and you can request those teachers.
Oh, that's good.
Parents just have to
That's
do the research.
Let me share something. This is from a person that actually works for the Columbus Board of Education. She shares that for 100 years, the district has not done a good job of educating the children. She said she graduated 7th in her class of over 300 students, but when she went to college, she struggled to compete with other students. She states that she simply had not been taught to study. She would cram for a test and pass it, but hadn't learned the information. She states that maybe they should have had the state test years ago. She said Columbus is now trying lots of new reading programs and other things to bring students up to where they can compete, but it takes a long time. You have to start with kindergartners. Seem like she's on target on things? And she also shares that Columbus takes a beating in the media. They blow up the bad things, but as soon as someone has a special needs child, they run to Columbus Public because they have very good programs for those children. She says she thinks there are many good things that go on in the Columbus City schools that they don't get credit for.
There are good things and there are bad things. However, what I don't agree with in that sense, and I've been talking to Brittany about this because I tried to get her not to go into education at all, teaching has not come into the current century. And ultimately they're going to realize that, number one, we really, when we talk about proficiency testing and that Ohio test and whatnot, I've never really bought into it because it really does not prove proficiency. When you ask the real question in terms of what is proficient. So if you, just say for instance, you can pass one of these tests and you graduate. Can you get a job with it? So, I mean, to me, proficiency is when one can feed oneself. And so just because you can pass that test, you still don't have the ability to get a job, a car,
What if you don't pass it? but you've done so
Yeah.
well.
So
Or
again,
is it
that,
really measured by?
it's not really proficiency. It's saying that a person is able to read, maybe they're able to add, but I just have to go back to that piece that in this economy, people who are proficient are people who are able to be self-sufficient, whether it be electrician or plumber or whatever. And so when we say proficient, most of our kids are proficient before they ever get to middle school because they know how to make noodles.
Show do.
They know, I mean, let's be honest about it. Many of the kids in Columbus Public know how to stay by themselves.
Underage.
I've known children, Brittany was talking about parents going off to jail. I've known children, serious. Both parents went to jail. And the kids, elementary school kids, kept the house until the parents returned from jail. So, I mean, when you talk about proficient, that's proficiency. So, when you talk about the test, I think that there's a strange idea when people say proficient. Well, proficient in what? To be able to pass a test doesn't necessarily mean proficient. To be able to pass a test means that you're able to get through the racist paradigm that is the test itself. And so the test is not necessarily geared toward whether or not a person is academically proficient. And so I think that education ultimately is going to change, and that's why you hear people talking about virtual schools, because in a sense, education right now, all it's good for is socialization more so than education. Because if you are going to an English class, you know Maya Angelou could teach every English class in the country via the internet. Political science could be taught by President Bill Clinton to every student in the country. Because again, we're now in a different age. So school really is more about socialization and not truly about proficiency, especially high school.
How y'all feel about that proficiency test? Are you too young for the proficiency test? When do they start doing it?
Standardized tests.
Standardized test. Do you do proficiency?
They do it more in middle school.
Middle school?
But then, like, when you get to high school, you do OGT and SAT.
So proficiency test and OGT is two different.
Yeah.
It's all standardized
How do you feel
tests.
about the proficiency? I'm glad they didn't have it when I was in school because I probably would still be taking it.
You hear it?
They have the ACT test, too, that test, I guess,
To get into college.
college.
Okay. Well, great show, great show. We're going to wrap this up. Thank you.